Hey guys, Waterfowler41 here, and in today's video, this is a super exciting one because we're installing some prototype downpipes from CV Fabrication on my Gen 3 Raptor. So these are soon to be released downpipes from CV Fab. They have kits for Gen 1, Gen 2s, and now they're going to be releasing these guys within the next month or so. So hopefully by the time I drop this video, I'll have a link that I could share down in the description below to get you guys these parts. But anyway, Gen 3 downpipes, these are going to allow our turbos to breathe a bit better. It's a 3-inch pipe all the way through from the top to the bottom. So again, much better flow coming through the whole pipe itself. And these are 100% bolt-on. So we're going to pull off the factory downpipes and these guys are going to slap right up into place. And then there's bungs for the O2 sensors. So we're going to pull the O2 sensors off the factory, drop them onto the CV Fab, and we're going to be in good shape. As far as install, this is my plan. So there's 2 skid plates underneath the truck that we're going to need to remove. Once we remove those, we'll be able to get access to the Y pipe and get access to all the bolts. Then what we're going to do is we're going to start our focus up at the top of the downpipe. So the connection between the downpipe and the turbo on both sides, we're going to work on those nuts. So there's going to be 2 on this side, 2 on the passenger side. Those are probably what's going to fight us the most compared to everything else on the install or everything else pertaining to the install. So we're going to work on those, take our time, make sure we don't crack any of the manifold studs, and then once we get those guys loose, then we can focus on the rest of the work here. So first and foremost, let's get up underneath the truck and go ahead and pull those 2 skid plates up. But I'll get the light underneath there, get a camera on it, and I'll show you what skid plates I'm talking about. Okay, so you can see my truck is on jack stands. I left the wheels on, but again, anytime you can give yourself a little bit more room underneath the truck when you're removing a one-piece downpipe like we're going to be removing, it's going to be helpful. So got the jack stands underneath there. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to focus on this big old skid plate right here, as well as that transmission skid plate. 13mm bolts on the front and the rear of that skid plate, 13 on each side of this guy, and then I believe 2 10mm up on the front, and then this should drop down. Once we get these skid plates off, we should have access to the underside of the Y pipe, and we should be able to start hitting those bolts with some Croyle or WD-40 to start breaking up those bolts from the manifold studs. Okay, so I have both the front skid plate removed. I just push that up forward, and then we have that transmission skid plate removed. The reason we have to undo this transmission skid plate is we're eventually going to have to throw a jack underneath here, underneath the transmission, so we can remove this little cross member and pull out the factory Y pipe. You see the factory Y pipe connects behind it. We're going to have to pull this guy out unless we want to cut it, but I guess I wouldn't advise that because you can salvage it as long as you take your time. Now what we're going to do is go up underneath the truck and figure out what and how many extensions we need to reach the front bolts on the factory downpipe. Like I said, I'm going to focus there first. I'm not going to do anything else with the rest of the system until I can get those 4 nuts undone. So let's get underneath the truck and start working on it. And what I'll do is once I can figure out how to loosen those guys up, I'll show you what I use to get access to them. I think I'm going to have to use a bunch of extensions. And then I'll show you kind of where they're at and how I access them. So up underneath the truck, I'm going to try to get a good angle here. So that's the front of the driver's side downpipe, and that's the lower nut that you need to get to. And that is the upper nut right there, and then you can see the O2 sensor wire. Super easy to get to and very easy to break free, assuming you did some preparation. So I use Croyle, which is a penetrating lube, and it's honestly one of the best ones I've found. It is pricey, about $23 for that tiny little can, but man, did it make quick work of these nuts. And they're free. They're just sitting there loose. On the passenger side, let me get the light flipped on over here. On the passenger side, same thing. There's the nuts right there. You got one on the left side, one on the right side. The one on the right side is a little bit tricky, so I have 2 extensions on my ratchet to get in there. You do need to use a swivel joint as well as a 15mm deep socket to get to all 4 of the nuts. A shallow socket's not going to cut it because the manifold stud sticks through there. But you can see both of them are loose. I'm just removing this last final nut over here. And then what we could do is start focusing on unplugging the O2 sensors and then crossbar and get everything else out here. But again, I thought this would be the hardest part, and this is super simple. Deep 15mm socket as well as a swivel joint, and these are in Croyle, and you make quick work of those turbo, the nuts on the turbo. Right, so let's talk O2 sensors. I'm on the driver's side, but it's going to be the same procedure on both sides. These are just easier to film. So as far as, what is this one? The top sensor, it plugs into this little tan connection, and you can see that little red tab. You need to pull back on that red tab before you depress this little tang here to release the sensor plug. Once you do that, it should be able to pop right off. Then the rear O2 sensor is a black plug right above there. There is no safety lock on there. All you need to do is just find this portion of the O2 sensor, push it down, and you should be able to unplug it. So again, the rear O2 sensor plugs in on top. The front O2 sensor plugs into the thicker plug, which is this tan guy, which has that locking mechanism on it. It's going to be the same on both sides, but when you go to reinstall these on your new downpipes, make sure you take note of which one goes where. So we know the bigger plug goes upstream, little plug goes down. So when you are undoing the O2 sensors, and I have them all unplugged here, it was actually a lot easier than I thought. So far this project is going pretty smoothly for what I am doing. Anyway, when you are undoing the O2 sensors, take note of where the wires are run, because you can see the O2 sensor, the front one, that green wire, is actually sitting in a wire trap there, and we're going to want to make sure that when we go to reinstall the CV Fab one, that the wire ends up in that location as well. Just so, you know, wire containment, we don't want anything dangling, particularly by the transmission where things can get pretty hot. But anyway, at this point, all the O2 sensors are undone, which is awesome. I thought for sure I'd have to leave one on there and then undo it when I get it out of the truck. But now what I'm going to do is turn my attention to the back exhaust clamps here. So this is where the downpipe connects to the midpipe, and that's their little trombone right there. So what I'm going to do is undo this bolt and this bolt on this side of the exhaust, and then undo this exhaust clamp here. And that way the exhaust itself is freed up from the truck. And then what we'll do is turn our attention here. But I need to get resituated. Let's figure out what tools we need for these guys and keep this project moving. We have our exhaust clamp off on the driver's side of the tailpipe section. And then I have the band clamp loosened up on the passenger side. This thing is stupid hard for what it is. So basically what you need to use is what's called a crow's foot. It's one of these little wrench things that you can attach to a ratchet. That way you can reach up here. And the reason why it's stupid is because the nuts are actually at the top, and there's no easy, clean way to get to the nuts from the side other than with something like this. So you basically pop this guy on there and then use a little tiny breaker bar to loosen it up. But once you get it loosened up, it's easy and everything frees up nicely. And again, this is a 13 millimeter socket on this side to loosen up these nuts. You can see the clamp right there. This is 15 millimeters, so get yourself 15 millimeter crow's foot from Harbor Freight. It works perfectly fine. So now the next thing we're going to do is turn our attention to all of the bolts on this cross member. We're going to need to remove this cross member. In order to do that, there's a 10 millimeter up on the top holding this exhaust shield here. Yep, 10 millimeter there, another 10 up on top, and then two big old 21 millimeter nuts right in the bottom section here. And then I believe these are either 16 or 18. We'll confirm that in a minute. Before we undo these guys, we're going to have to put a brace on the transmission here to hold everything in place, so it's not going to put all the weight on the transmission mount here. So let's go ahead and get these nuts undone, get those 10 millimeters up on top, get these loosened up, and then get a car jack up underneath here so we could brace that transmission. I'll show you what we're looking at before we go ahead and remove this guy, because once we're down there, it is all downhill with this install. So I got the 10 millimeters undone. Again, all you got to do is undo this side. You don't need to do anything else with the rest of that heat shield. You just want to be able to make sure that this can drop down from the rest of the vehicle. Then what we're going to do, I went ahead and removed the two 21 millimeter nuts in here. So right now the transmission's sitting on top of this brace, but it's not bolted to it. Now the next thing we're going to do is remove these two 15 millimeter bolts on this side and two on that side. We're going to remove the inside one first. We're going to leave the outside one in place. Same thing on that side. Then I'm going to put a car jack underneath here to hold the transmission up. That way I could loosen up everything else. Then we could pull this guy out, and then we could start to focus on removing the actual downpipe. Again, you have to do this so you can get the downpipe out, since it's two pieces and it's connected all the way through. You also need to do this so we can get to this little bracket here. And you can see there's two hangers. There's one here and one here. In order to free the downpipe off of that hanger, the whole downpipe itself has to go that way. So we got our one bolt on each side just holding this brace in place. The nut is off of the bolt, so we're good to go. What I'm gonna do now is get a jack underneath the transfer case here and jack it up a little bit just to relieve some of the pressure on here. And then we're gonna pop this bracket down and out of the place by removing the bolt over there and the bolt here. It should theoretically drop down. Then after we get this out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and remove this little bracket here. So there's two bolts on each side. I think those are 15 millimeter ones, 15 millimeter bolts on both sides. So there's two there, two there. That is that rubber hanger that's holding the downpipe. The reason why I want to remove that before I remove the rest of the downpipe, I think getting that out of the way is going to give me a lot more room to play with to wiggle this guy out of the way. So, all right, once we got our cross brace out of the way, we now have access to the bracket here. This is the hangers for the center of that downpipe for the factory one. So what you want to do is remove the two 15 millimeter bolts on both sides. I got the two off on this side. I have one more on that side. Be careful. When you go to remove that last one, this whole downpipe is going to want to drop down, because this is what's holding it in place, since you've already loosened up everything on the turbo side and everything over here, and you don't want it to drop and bend any of the pipes. So we're going to go ahead and push up on everything, remove that last 15 millimeter bolt, slide this guy off so he's out of the way, and then figure out how to jimmy rig this guy out of here. And then once that's done, then we can figure out how we're going to put that CV Fab downpipe in. But again, that's multiple pieces. I think it's gonna be a lot easier than removing one like this that's a single piece. All right, so I just found something here. On the portion on the driver's side pipe, the downpipe that connects to the mid pipe, if you look closely, there's a tab up top, and that tab is holding onto a little rivet, and you will not be able to remove this section or the whole Y pipe until you use a flathead to pop that tab or that little tongue up over that rivet. So that is what's catching me. I was trying to fight with this thing, figure out what the heck is holding it on. Well, that is it. It's basically this tab that's over that bolt, and we just need to pry it up with a flathead, and then we should be able to slide everything forward and then pop it out. And then this band clamp here stays with the exhaust. They're out. All right, it was actually a lot easier once I figured out that you had to flip that tab up to get it past this little notch here. Once that was done, all you do is you slide this portion out, and then you got to push the mid pipe up a little bit just to clear this area, and then the whole system just pulls right back. It doesn't get hung up on anything. As long as you undid your O2 sensors, it was very easy to get this out. I've watched a lot of videos in Gen 2s, and it looks like those guys have to really muscle a ton. On the Raptor Gen 3, it was really easy getting these things out. So now the next thing I'm gonna do is go ahead one by one and swap over the O2 sensors to the CV Fab downpipes. So I don't have the correct wrench for that. I'm gonna use an adjustable wrench. It's probably not the best thing, but what you can do is go out and get an O2 socket, and it connects to your ratchet. And it makes removing these guys a lot easier. Before we install those O2 sensors on the CV Fab stuff, I'm gonna hit them with some anti-seize just to make sure that everything's nice and kosher and the threads don't seize up. So let's go ahead and swap those out, and then we'll start figuring out how this guy goes into that truck. Right, so I have the passenger side done. I totally lied. It's actually a 22 millimeter wrench that you need to get those O2 sensors off. So once you get it on there, it's a tight fit, but once you get the 22 millimeter wrench on there, I use a hammer just to give it a little bit of an impact, just to break it free. Once you break it free, it's very easy to come out. So you can see the passenger side's ready to go. I got the downstream and upstream sensors installed. Now I got to do the driver's side. That little guy is fighting me. I soaked him in a little bit more Croil. I'm gonna go ahead and turn my attention to that guy, a little bit of a tighter fit, and then we should be ready to go to start swapping this stuff in. The nice thing about swapping in aftermarket downpipes is they're typically in multi-pieces, not this big assembly. So what we'll be able to do is do one side at a time. I might just do maybe the driver's side first, and then focus on passenger side. Passenger side is gonna be super easy. It's just a single pipe, and really just snaking our fingers up there to get the nuts onto the turbo flanges. But let's keep going with the O2 sensors. This is one of those projects where I expected things to go pretty screwy halfway through, but everything so far has been pretty smooth. Now, in full transparency, my truck's got 16,000 miles, so that's probably playing into the fact that everything's so easy to remove. But I've heard people with the same amount of miles on the same year truck have to fight, and I actually heard a guy who broke the stud on his turbo flange, so maybe it's just cranking down too much. But again, use Croil, take your time, be patient, everything will come off. All right, so my two downpipes are ready to go for the catted side of everything. Then I have the bottom portion right here. That's good to go. That's got the bracket on it. That's the bracket that attaches to the bottom of the transmission. As far as reinstall, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna do one side at a time. So I think I'm gonna start with the passenger side. That looks easiest. That way I can figure out how everything goes. And then I'll turn my attention to the driver's side, and then I'll install the upper piece first, and then I'll install the rear piece. So let's go ahead and do the passenger side. Let's take a look at it once it's installed, and then we can turn our attention to the driver's side stuff, and then it's just basically putting everything back together. Make sure you're undoing a lot of bolts, so make sure that you're being, careful and clean with where everything's at. That way you don't lose track of what goes where, because there are a lot of important bolts that you removed to get these guys on, and if you don't put the right ones back, you might end up with some funky stuff going on once you fire your truck up and start driving. And a lot of times that leads to a lot of really bad vibration in your truck, especially when you're dealing with the transmission. So the passenger side is fully installed. Sensors and everything are plugged in and routed the right way. One note, when you're installing flanges like this on turbos where there's a lot of high heat, you want to make sure that it's a flat seal. So once you start to feel tension on one side, then give the other side a couple turns. Keep going back and forth. That way you pull everything in nice and evenly. So you can see it's installed here, all the way back to the mid pipe. So one note, this is a butt joint between the two pipes, so they basically touch each other, and then this pipe clamp goes over the seam and then seals everything up. So one thing I did do is I took advantage of the fact that we don't need to index anything on this clamp anymore. Turned it down so then I can get access to those bolts, so it's easier to tighten them up. So passenger side is done. Now I'm going to turn my attention to the driver's side, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to install the upper pipe first on the turbo, and then I'm going to come back here and install that bracket for the that crossover pipe, and just basically assemble everything from the front to the back, because it is a lot easier to get to everything and get to those 2 screws on the turbo when you get the pipes out of the way. So let's go ahead and get the driver's side installed. Again, don't forget to plug in your O2 sensors, but also make sure they're routed the right way. You remember that when we removed it, the screen wire was sitting up in that little plastic clip, so I went ahead and made sure everything's clipped back in there, and then it is a lot easier to plug everything in with that cross brace out of the way. Well, one of these days I'm going to get myself my own car jack, but until then we're going to be working off the floor here. So I have the driver's side catted part of the downpipe installed. It's just loosely hanging there. All the O2 sensors are plugged in, so I don't need to worry about that. I have that exhaust hanger fully mounted to the transmission. Now all I need to do is mount that cross pipe into those rubber little gaskets there, and then mate it up with this guy, and then align it with that pipe. So it's going to take kind of a juggling act here, but that is the last piece, and then I can start reassembling everything. So it is nice once you get that cross member out of the way. It really does open up a ton of room here for you to work, but also this being in multiple pieces also makes reinstallation a hell of a lot easier. Got the driver's side pipe installed. Again, make sure when you're tightening that flange, you go one side, then the other side, then the other side. Just kind of go back and forth and make sure you get a nice flat seal. Then before I tighten that, actually, I threw the V-band clamp that comes in the kit on here just to make sure the crossover pipe as well as the driver's side pipe are aligned. I didn't tighten it down all the way. I did put the top of the nut, or I guess where you tighten it down, where I wanted it, so that when I do eventually tighten it down, it's up and out of the way, but easy to get to. So now what I'm going to do is go to the back of the truck and tighten up the rear of the downpipes to the factory kit. So this is where the CV kit touches the factory trombone there. On the driver's side, you know the passenger side's already done with that butt connector on the butt clamp there. So we just got to tighten this guy up and then go through, make sure everything is tight, do one more cross check on all the sensors, and then we could start throwing everything back together and finish up the install. Now that the downpipes are fully installed, so I went ahead and double checked all the sensors, everything's plugged in, everything's tightened down. I'm gonna go ahead and put the transmission cross brace in, that way I can get the car jack out of the way. And then what I'll do is fire up the truck and just double check for any leaks. This is a good time to do it because you don't wanna put all your skid plates back, then you won't be able to see it or hear any of the leaks. So put the cross brace in. That's about all you need to do at this point before you put the skid plates back in, just to test and make sure everything is sealed up properly. Really what you wanna focus on is the downpipe to turbo connection. You wanna make sure that those are nice and sound and nice and sealed up. Okay, so hopefully the installation instructions were pretty straightforward and helps you get your CV Fabs installed and get those factory downpipes off your truck. Anyway, a couple takeaways before we get into the sound bites. First and foremost, tools and things that kind of make life a lot easier with the project. Obviously, Croyle. I cannot speak more highly about this stuff. It is a little expensive, but it really does work, and it makes quick work of those nuts, particularly the ones on the turbo. Tools themselves, the crow's foot was a lifesaver when it came time to get the clamp off of the passenger side of that downpipe on the factory. Again, the nuts are facing up towards the bottom of the truck, and there's really no easy way to get a wrench in there, so the crow's foot really did make life a lot easier. And then make sure you have a 22 millimeter wrench. This is so you can remove the O2 sensors. This is probably the cleanest and easiest way to remove it. You can obviously get an O2 socket, which might make quick work of these as well, but really a 22 millimeter wrench is super easy. The other thing that I will highly recommend is swivel joints. So make sure you have these for 3/8 and 1/2 inch, because you are going to need these, as well as a 15 millimeter deep socket and a 21 millimeter deep socket. Those will be lifesavers, and they will make your project a lot easier. So before you start your project, make sure you have those tools. Second thing, performance and sound wise. So I'll talk about performance first. I don't typically try to say that I've felt performance on something after I install it, because I know a lot of the times it's kind of placebo effect, right? You do something, you expect some sort of performance return. But I really do feel like after installing the downpipes, I'm getting a little bit more snap out of my truck in the lower RPM range. I feel like I'm getting into that torque band a lot quicker, and I do feel like there was some improvement. Now, one of the things that they say about downpipes, and I'm totally behind this, is yes, you're going to get performance right off the bat with them, probably a little bit in the beginning, but once you get a tune or a custom tune so that you could totally take advantage of all the characteristics of those new downpipes, that's when you really feel everything come to life. So tune is definitely in the future down the road, but for now, I just want to install all these parts, get everything kind of teed up, and then we'll go and get everything tuned, and I'll reach out to a custom tuner for that part. As far as sound, the best way I could put it is everything is bumped up a notch when you talk about your exhaust mode. So in normal exhaust mode, it now sounds like sport. In sport, it sounds like Baja. And in Baja, with the CV Fab ones, it's absolutely nuts. So if you are looking to do an exhaust upgrade, improve the note of your truck, but also get some sort of performance out of it, definitely look to do downpipes. Don't waste your time on catbacks. They're really, I don't think those are making that much sound difference. This is the best bang for your buck as far as exhaust upgrades for these trucks. So anyway, without further ado, here is a bunch of sound clips from the before and after the downpipes. And if you have any questions or anything like that, leave them down in the comments below or hit me up on Instagram or email or what have you. Again, hopefully this shows you how to replace your CV down or how to swap out your factory downpipes for the CV ones. I'm really happy with the quality, the fit, the installation. And once they drop them on their store, I will leave a link to these guys down in the description below. I don't have any sort of timeline just yet. Hopefully soon, but we'll see. But anyway, thank you very much for watching. Enjoy the sound clips.